I am a foreign agent. I am an artist. I am here with IFA, the Institute for Foreign Cultural Relations, financed by the German Federal Foreign Office. My work leads me to countries that were part of the former Ostblock. Responsible for my occupation is probably my grandfather, the East German artist Karl-Heinz Jakob, who worked as an agent as well. He went to Cuba right after the revolution in 1961 as part of the first East German artist delegation visiting the socialist brother state. Aboard the ship Völkerfreundschaft, meaning friendship of the peoples. Part of the delegation was also actor Armin Müller-Stahl. He was what you could call a double agent of the arts. First for Socialist East Germany, later for West Germany, and finally for the US. From my grandfather's trip to Cuba, all that is left are his artworks and his color photographs. For me, they all carry a certain mystique, like this one, where I am convinced to see Fidel Castro in the blur. Besides meeting Cuban revolutionaries and visiting newly built modernist housing projects, Karl-Heinz was part of a group show at the Museo Nacional de Bellas Artes de Cuba. His and the work of his fellow artists was placed in a beautiful exhibition space between palm trees. Karl-Heinz, whose works had always been known for being in a gray color scheme with somber and hard-edged faces, came back from Cuba with a love for colors. Two of his works from Cuba were bought by the ZFK, Zentrum für Kunstausstellungen der DDR. In 1990, after German unification, they became part of the collection of the IFA. And I am trying to follow the journey of the works, as well as the journeys of my grandfather. In 2021, I was invited to participate in the Havana Biennial. I was very curious to go and see for myself the Cuba I had known as a myth since my childhood. I wanted to do a work about Tamara Bunke, the revolutionary from East Germany who died in the Bolivian jungle with Che Guevara. Tanya was born in Argentina to a family of Jewish communists who had fled from the Nazis. The family moved to the East German town of Eisenhüttenstadt in 1952. Of course, at that time, the town was not yet called Eisenhüttenstadt, the name under which it is known for being a socialist model city close to the Polish border. At that time, it still had its original name, Stalinstadt. Tanya stayed there until 1961, when she gave up her German passport for a Cuban one to join the revolutionary forces. In the same year, the Berlin Wall was built, and my grandfather went to Havana. So 60 years after that, I went to Havana as well. I was ready to participate in Havana Biennial, despite calls for boycott and artists leaving the country on a daily basis. I wanted to see the country that had left such a lasting impression on my grandfather. And I wanted to understand what had happened to Cuba, a place that had always been an important point of reference for artists, and to a biennial that had produced groundbreaking works and shows over decades. And I guess I was also looking for the Völkerfreundschaft I knew from my grandfather's myth of post-revolutionary Cuba. In the end, it was the Cuban authorities who didn't want me to produce a work there. And I had to come to terms with the reality that, in fact, I was not part of an artist delegation from a socialist brother country, but a foreign agent from the capitalist West. In 2021, I was also exhibiting my work in Ukraine for the first time. I was invited to show my work as part of the Future Generation Art Prize at the Pinchuk Art Center in Kyiv. Parallel, my work was also part of a group show in Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow. The show was a cultural contribution to the so-called Petersburg dialogue between Germany and Russia. I was curious to go there, to follow the political agenda of Germany at the time, looking for a deeper understanding of my role as an artist, as a tool of cultural diplomacy, as a true foreign agent. On the photo, you see German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock visiting my installation Ostalgie, a work about nostalgia for the East. After her last in-person conversation with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, just weeks before Russia's full-scale invasion. As historian Clemens Villinger once put it, this moment also marked the end of the German political Ostalgie towards Russia. The full-scale invasion led to the Pinchuk Art Center in Kyiv being barricaded to protect the artworks. Museum staff were forced to flee from bombing or joined the fighting on the front line. Our planned exhibition for Venice Biennial was cancelled. Instead, the curators organized a powerful show about Ukraine, with President Zelensky speaking at the opening from his bunker about the power of artists, how politicians can only do so much, but artists can move people. If there was ever a moment where I felt recruited, that would have been it. Zelensky made sure that our works would be evacuated out of Ukraine. It felt weird that our works would get such care, that someone would drive with a truck through a war zone to bring our works back home. I found a museum in Berlin, the Gropiusbau, to show the work upon arrival from Ukraine. Not as a furniture installation, but as ruins for people to sit on, to touch, turning the objects into agents reporting from the front line, creating a new Völkerfreundschaft through furniture, to understand the closeness of this war and how much we as Germans are part of it. Participating in shows and producing works is a way for me to understand and learn things about local contexts and let other people, the audience, experience them with me. I see my work as a way to cross borders and to communicate in places where dialogue is difficult or impossible. Can an exhibition be realized in countries where people are oppressed, imprisoned, or killed, in cooperation with the state, with an oligarch, or with a German institution as a foreign agent? Those were my questions going to Russia. I came back with more questions than before, not sure if I got any answers at all. What my participation in the Tretyakov exhibition has shown me are the limits of what I as an artist can achieve by going into countries of oppression. That my urge to want to see for myself and meet people can lead to me being complicit as a foreign agent used by both sides. Last year, I was invited to participate in the Kyiv Biennial in Ukraine. After almost 2 years of thinking about this war day and night, I felt it was important for me to go and be present to produce a new work on site for the context of the biennial. I realized it would not make sense to bring back a truck full of furniture. Rather, I wanted to produce a work that would respond to the special occasion, that a biennial was taking place in the midst of a war. I decided a music performance could capture this moment in time and create a shared experience for everyone participating and seeing it, that they could take with them as a memory forever. I decided to only work with men, as they are the ones who cannot leave the country anymore. The work became a reflection on the mobilization and the fact that in war, all artists, actors, and musicians become potential soldiers. Coming somewhere for the first time is always the beginning of an understanding, of a conversation, What you think you see or hear from afar can prove to be a cliché or a trap. But we as artists need to go on that journey, being led by our colleagues who can guide us in depth we didn't know about, or places we couldn't imagine exist. And they might show us how it is to fight for something in the street that we take for granted. I grew up in East Germany in the 1990s. When my parents went to the demonstrations in 1989, I was 5 years old and stayed at home with my grandparents. I didn't understand what was happening in the 1980s, but in the 1990s, I was aware of the neo-Nazi radicalization wave in East Germany, far-right powers from East and West uniting, with the socialist ruins and objects as backdrops and props. Some objects from the GDR are still haunting the everyday life in East Germany. One of this is the gas mask of the NVA, Nationale Volksarmee. In Georgia today, similar masks are worn by protesters as protection from tear gas. The mask turns into a symbol of a state of emergency and of self-protection against state power. In this montage from 2015 of the Mother of Georgia statue, the aim was to make people aware of the air pollution in Tbilisi. Today, it makes her seem like one of the protesters on the streets. In Kyiv, there's the statue of Mother Ukraine. Built in 1981, she's part of the National Museum of the History of Ukraine in the Second World War. As a World War II monument, she was excluded from the 2015 decommunization laws. In 2023, the Soviet heraldry was removed from the monument's shield and replaced with Ukraine's coat of arms. I live on Alexanderplatz in Berlin, one of the few places in Berlin where you can still get a sense of the city during socialist times. Because most blocks are city-owned housing, the buildings and their inhabitants stayed. Besides the architecture and the old neighbors, most things have changed since 1989. The only thing that survived from the time is a vendor selling Soviet memorabilia in front of our house. Every day I leave the house, I see these Soviet fur hats and also the gas masks. I think about the 1990s when the business was booming, but also about the time when Soviet troops were still stationed all throughout East Germany, and it was part of the Soviet sphere of influence. I see those gas masks and think about war. Alexanderplatz is a place that has the history of the Cold War embedded in it, in the capital of a country that struggles to face this reality, that a silent majority of a part of this country still only speaks Russian, not English, and is receptive to disinformation through Russia Today and Telegram channels. When Kharkiv TV tower was destroyed last month, my heart skipped a beat. It made it very real to think about how our Fernsehturm, how Alexanderplatz could be bombed just like this, how vulnerable and helpless this would make us feel. It made me think about the attack on Kyiv TV tower at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. My colleagues Yarema Malashuk and Roman Henrike had filmed their work live stream inside the TV station in 2020. In the video, they had dancers of the ensemble of the Armed Forces of Ukraine perform in Soviet military uniforms. This year, Ukrainian collective DND installed their work Salute from 2022, consisting of a destroyed chandelier opposite to the Berlin TV tower. While the work deals with the destruction of cultural heritage from Soviet times in the context of decommunization during the current war, it also brings the war close into the heart of Germany. 1 year ago, Chechen warlord Ramzan Kadyrov spoke about how East Germany is part of the Russian sphere of influence, how it is Russia's territory and should be reoccupied. A satirical website reacted, not only to Kadyrov's claims, but also to the demands of the German peace movement under leadership of Sarah Wagenknecht and Alice Schwarzer, who advocated for Ukraine to surrender in order to secure peace for the rest of Europe, suggesting we should give up East Germany to Russia to avoid World War III. For me, I couldn't laugh so much about it, because all this feels very real to me. Maybe because I travel and speak constantly to people from Ukraine, Poland, Latvia, Georgia, and see myself as part of a shared, inherited experience and connection, while many of my friends and colleagues more easily laugh it off. Empathy in times of crisis, feeling connected and being scared for our colleagues and friends, creating a network of shared experiences and hopes. This is what Völkerfreundschaft can mean today, built by foreign agents like us. Thank you.